From an underrated defensive lineman to maybe getting an answer finally as to why a certain cornerback is not on the Texans. 4 big takeaways from DeMeco Ryans at the annual meetings. Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans. The annual meetings in Orlando. I was there talking to DeMeco Ryans, and there was plenty from the Texans head coach to discuss and get into. These are the 4 biggest things that jumped off the page from me. It starts with the defensive lineman. It moves over to an explanation of the trade and then some conversation about the cornerback spot. First, the young guys, and then maybe an answer to why the highly sought-after Xavien Howard is not on the Houston Texans. Let's start with that big, nasty defensive lineman. Nick Caserio was on the radio in Houston on Sports Radio 610, and he gushed about Denico Autry, the signing the Texans made from the Tennessee Titans, a 2-year, $20 million commitment for the veteran defensive tackle. Double-digit sacks last year, and he's the same age as Jerry Hughes when Jerry Hughes arrived in Houston a couple of years ago. So Autry takes over as the elder statesman in the defensive line room, and Nick Caserio couldn't stop talking about how great Denico Autry is. Called him a scary MFer, the type of guy you want to take into an alley with you, and a really good football player. Well, DeMeco Ryans, not as glowing as Caserio, but he's clearly excited about his defensive lineman.
Watch the tape, you know Autry is a great football player. He loves football. You can tell it just by watching his tape and the respect that he has around the league, not only from offensive linemen but also other defensive linemen. Understand his play style and how effective he is as a player, playing inside, playing outside. He gets it done. So excited to add, his relentless mindset to our team.
Autry, the elder statesman I mentioned, the relentless mindset, something the Texans mentioned quite a bit about their players. And then you start listening to how DeMeco Ryans is going to use him. He can use him inside. He can use him on the outside of defensive end to spell Will Anderson or Danielle Hunter. There's a lot to like about Denico Autry. And with Nick Caserio's comments and DeMeco Ryans' comments, you smash them together. And I don't know if all of us are giving the proper amount of respect to the Denico Autry addition for this Texans team. I mean, you start to think about a top 3 in Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, and Denico Autry that all have absolutely, without question, double-digit sack potential amongst them, and you could put them all on the field at the same time. That was a really underrated signing by the Texans that went under the radar because less than 24 hours after they agreed to a contract with him, they made a big splash and got Danielle Hunter. Now, obviously, Hunter's way better and has a higher ceiling, but Denico Autry, in the final few seasons that he has left in the NFL, still a really productive player, and DeMeco Ryans talked about it. Not just the respect from the opposing offensive lineman, but the respect that he commands from his fellow defensive linemen. Welcome to the elder statesman and perhaps one of the more underrated free agent signings in all of football. Now, the Houston Texans made a trade before the owners' meetings, and they moved out of the first round into the second round with the Minnesota Vikings taking over the first round pick and the Texans taking over the Vikings second round pick, a second rounder next year, so on and so forth. Well, that's a Nick Caserio thing, but nothing happens without DeMeco Ryans approving and signing off of it. What did the head coach have to say about the trade, getting the Texans out of the first round and heavily invested into the second round?
Behind, moving back, in the draft is just, we feel like in this draft there's a large amount of players right in that second to third, fourth round. It's a lot of guys right there that can come in and help our team. Right, we feel like that's where as I said, the sweet spot of the draft is this year, and so we're excited about that move, and we feel like we can add some really quality players to our team.
If the Texans believe that players basically 20 through 60 are the same guy, you could still end up with 2 of them. But if you're going to end up with 2 of them, but you could also end up with an additional second-round pick, that's kind of the way the Texans operated. Yes, there exists a scenario where a really, really good player that could have been a day one, unquestioned starter is available at 23, and we're all looking around on draft night going, gee, I wish they hadn't made that trade. But as far as what I like from this draft, where the Texans are picking, what they might be adding, which I'm leaning a lot more towards wide receiver, there should be a lot of wide receivers where it won't be crazy to select that player where the Texans are selecting in the second round, with their first selection being 42 overall. There's, to me, not going to be a lot of wide receivers available at 23 where you just absolutely feel like you absolutely need to make that decision at 23. Like, if Adonai Mitchell's there at 23, sure, that's a conversation. The Texas standout wide receiver. Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, another big-time standout. I don't believe either of those players are going to be there at 23. I know there was a mock draft posted this week where Brock Bowers, the star tight end from Georgia, is available at 23. And that's a former NFL executive that put that mock draft up. Brock Bowers isn't going to be there at 23. I still don't love the trade because I do believe that on draft night you could have gotten the same deal done from a timing perspective, but it allows the Texans to build their board with a lot of lead time and maybe with 30 visits to the team still active, change some of their 30 visit strategy in finding out a little bit more about these second rounders and third rounders. And as DeMeco Ryans talked about, that second round, that 30 to 60 slate of players, a little bit of a sweet spot. Well, it'll be too sweet for the Texans as they're set to make 2 selections in that spot. One of those players might be a cornerback, but listening to DeMeco Ryans talk about the young cornerbacks that the team added, it doesn't seem as likely. Now, obviously, if a really good player is there, go ahead and take him, throw him into the fire with Jeff Okudah and CJ Henderson, who were both signed by the Texans. A significant investment it was not, with Okudah and Henderson, who are both trying to bounce back after sort of wandering through their NFL careers after both formerly being top 10 selections. Okudah, number 3 overall to the Lions, and then played for the Falcons. Henderson, 10 overall with the Jaguars, then played with the Panthers. Now they're both members of the Houston Texans. And DeMeco Ryans explained what he liked about those young players and exactly why they're both here.
Corners, I see young players, right? Young, talented guys who, for wherever they were picked, it really doesn't matter to me. I see young, talented guys on tape, long guys who can run, who can play sticky coverage. You just have to be more consistent. And sometimes guys just need a new scene, right? And hopefully change the scenery helps these guys out. But it's adding those guys we just talked about, man, you want to come in and compete. So his competition, and that both guys understand that, and as much healthy competition as we can have on our roster, that means we're getting better. If our depth is getting better, we have guys actually competing for spots, and our team gets better.
Let me put my DeMeco Ryans translator on for you. We kind of thought the situations both those guys in stunk for trying to succeed, and they're in a much better situation with a chance to succeed here, and we're basically going to roll the football out there and let these two guys battle it out through the duration of training camp and try to figure out who that guy should be opposite Derek Stingley. Sound good to you? It sounds good to me. I like the approach there. Look, you can tell me about the skills and the potential that could be there with Okudah and Henderson. The Texans coaching staff has to go and draw those things out, make sure you see those, and make sure they can show up on a consistent basis over the course of the season. And if it can't, you go to the other guy. And if that guy can't get it done, you keep going down the depth chart. That's where maybe having a rookie who's not competing right away with Okudah or Henderson for those starting reps, but by midseason or towards the back end of the season could be pushing those guys for those starting reps and that starting spot opposite Derek Stingley at the cornerback position. That's something that the Texans should consider right there. And again, we talked about that sweet spot of the draft, that second round, but don't force it. You got 2 options. One of those guys will emerge as the starter. The other guy's going to turn into a hungry depth player who's hopefully going to be on his P's and Q's, ready to jump at whatever opportunity the other one's failure presents to him. Now, those 2 players, Okudah and Henderson, are here. Xavien Howard, the former standout from the Miami Dolphins, is not. Howard is a player that's been very vocal about his desire to play for the Houston Texans. And so I didn't ask specifically about Xavien Howard, but I did ask DeMeco Ryans. I said, hey, when you hear that players want to come play for the Houston Texans, when you hear guys vocalizing that that's the case, do you feel like you've noticed that the Texans have become sort of a go-to spot for guys and people really want to play for the Texans? Previously, you only wanted to play for the Texans if the money was right. Now you've got Xavien Howard in public talking about he doesn't care how much money he makes. He just wants to play for the Houston Texans. Well, we may have our answer as to why it's Jeff Okudah and C.J. Henderson and not Xavien Howard.
This is about adding the right guys. So if guys want to play for us, that's great. But it's about adding the right guys to our team. I guess it's cool to hear that guys would like to come and play for us, but you also have to understand we're going to work here, right? It's going to be tough working out in the Houston heat. Guys understand that, but I think the excitement from guys wanting to come to Houston, it comes from our young players, CJ, Will, Tank, what those guys were able to do last year. I think people see that from the outside, and they see the talent that these young guys have, and they want to be a part of it.
Now, the first part's the interesting part. Yeah, guys can want to play for the Texans, but the Texans have to want them, have to see them as a fit. Now, again, when I asked DeMeco Ryans about that, I did not mention Xavien Howard specifically. But when you think about players that have publicly campaigned for an opportunity to play for the Houston Texans, he's the one that comes to mind. And we've asked here on the YouTube channel in the comment section, which, of course, you can access right now as you're watching the video down below. And then just in the videos, in the chats, in the live streams, why not Xavien Howard? It seems to me that simply he does not fit what the Texans want to do for some specific reason. You think about the locker room composition or this, or maybe he feels like maybe the Texans feel like Xavien Howard has to start. But the first part of DeMeco Ryans' answer there, that guys can want to play for us, but we have to believe them to be a fit. That is an important aspect. And when you think about how close that Texans locker room was last year, you don't want to take any chances on a guy that maybe doesn't work out. Again, I'm not saying that Xavien Howard isn't that guy. And heck, they may feel like down the road they still need that veteran to show up for this team, and maybe they go to the Xavien Howard well. But as it stands right now, my best guess as to why Xavien Howard is not a member of the Houston Texans, but Jeff Okudah and C.J. Henderson is, well, Xavien Howard just doesn't fit what the Texans do. You know what does fit? A thumbs up on the video from you. I would certainly appreciate it. On your way down to the thumbs up, also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So much more to get to. The draft is starting to really heat up. You're starting to feed the furnace of draft analysis and conversations. We'll have a ton of that here for you on the channel, plus more to come from what I learned and talked about at the owners meeting / annual meetings, however you want to phrase it. That's coming your way as well. Tons of stuff on Houston Football, the site where I do all my writing about the Houston Texans. www.houfootball.com is the website for you to go check it out. There's always free content on the site, but of course, paid subscribers get everything from Houston Football. And there's going to be some special draft coverage on Houston Football, so you don't want to miss out on it. Just $7 a month gets you everything. I will make it worth your $7. I promise. I cover the Texans as fervently and as emotionally and as thoroughly as just about anybody. I'm at everything. I've been at every draft event here in the offseason as well, so there's going to be a ton of fun draft stuff as well. Draft-related events, Senior Bowl, Scouting Combine, so on and so forth. We're going to cover it all for you here on the YouTube channel at Houston Football as well. I greatly appreciate all the support from people like you watching the video. Make it possible for me to go cover the Texans in Orlando for the annual meetings, in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl. So I do say thank you. I hope my gratitude is appropriately expressed, and I hope that you enjoy the content that I'm able to produce because of your support. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I can't wait, as always, till we talk Texans again soon.